Hi everyone, I'm Alexia Casale and I'm here with the wonderful Louisa Reid, whose new book, Wrecked, is out on September 3rd, 2020. And we're going to talk a little bit about the book, and we're going to start with Louisa. Where did the idea come? What is the idea and where did it come from?
So the idea is about whether or not now I don't want to give away any spoilers, so this is why I have to be careful what I say. So it's a book about justice and doing the right thing, and it's also a book about risk taking and how, when you are a young person, you get yourself into all sorts of scrapes and trouble, which I was quite expert at doing, and never having any kind of fatal consequences. But then when it kind of goes over into the adult territory, it's about, hang on a minute, look, what the way I've been living my life potentially is incredibly dangerous and has ramifications in all sorts of ways. So Joe, the protagonist, is on trial for causing death by dangerous driving. A young mother who works as a nurse the cars have collided on the way home from a New Year's Eve party on a rainy night, a dark night in the middle of the countryside, and the woman, Stephanie White, is dead. And he's in the dock and he's facing potentially 14 years in prison for causing the death of this innocent woman who's been out saving lives. So I was interested to explore ideas of justice and also about how that works when you're a young man from a kind of fairly low middle class, working class background, and I was particularly wanted to write a book about crimes because local to me there was not so long ago a stabbing of a lad who'd come into the area where I live, which is pretty suburban and pretty middle class, and he'd come from perhaps a slightly more disadvantaged background, and he was involved with another group, and there was drugs involved, and this lad was stabbed, the one from the slightly more disadvantaged background, by one of his friends. And there was a lot of interest, media interest in this case. And the boy who was on trial was from a very well-to-do, wealthy background. And there was a lot to do with kind of social class, and does that have an impact on the way you get treated by the law, by the police, by the courts? It shouldn't have any relevance to outcomes, but can it, and will it? So that was what kind of set me on wanting to write about this young man who's facing a huge disaster in his own life. And there were other reasons too. I wanted to write a book from a boy's perspective. I just read Normal People by Sally Rooney, which I absolutely loved. And I loved the character of Connell in that. And I was a bit bereft when I finished reading the book. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to make up my own male character now, who I can get really invested in and really care about and want the best for. But I also I've always been desperate to write a good love story, and this was again something that for Wrecked I thought, well, I'm going to try and get my wonderful love story in here. And of course with me everything goes a bit to the dark side, and maybe the love story isn't the love story that we wanted it to be, but that was also a kind of driving factor. So I think those are all the main things that got me writing this book.
I was lucky enough to read this right at the start when you were first drafting it, which was such an honour. So thank you very much. But it changed a lot. It changed a lot from that first draft that you very kindly shared with me to the finished project. So without giving away the spoilers, so sorry folks out there, we're going to keep this spoiler free as much as possible. What changed that you can tell us about between first draft and last? And what's that process and that journey like?
Well, first draft, I started with the crash. That was right at the beginning, the New Year's Eve party, and Joe and Imogen leaving and having the crash. And it was a kind of chronological, linear narrative that took Joe through to his courtroom. And I guess the reader sort of knew throughout that draft what had happened, and it was just about working out how it was going to go really for Joe, and what his future was going to be. But I'd decided it needed more tension, and I wanted to make to really immerse the reader into that court from the outset, and the jeopardy, the kind of like big stakes here, is he guilty or not, is he going to prison or not, and have that tension right taking us through. So I loved the way that Jason Reynolds did his story, which is set in an elevator, the verse novel. And I thought that was so clever, the tightness, the tautness of that. And I thought, right, well, I'm going to try and get my story to fit into a kind of really tight time frame. It is a bigger time frame, but the majority of the action takes place over 2 days, with flashbacks into the past, so that we can see how Joe got to this point. And in that way, I was able to perhaps present the reader with a few more surprises, more suspense, keep them guessing a little bit about the whats and the whys and the hows, and none of which I'm going to tell you here. So I hope that tension has come through. It was certainly tricky to do. It was like wrestling with a bear at times, as I chopped and changed and put things back together, and still no, and I was drawing it out on a whiteboard, and I was printing bits off and juggling them around. So it took me about 5 or 6 goes to get to this structure, I think. So it was definitely a challenge, but I enjoyed that challenge, and I'm glad I did it, because hopefully it's made me a better writer.
Well, it's brilliant, and to see the journey the book has been on has been really exciting. So I'm not the only person who was reading it, obviously. I'm just one of the lucky people who gets to do that. But your editor, Bella, obviously had a lot of thought. So what's that sort of tension between taking the feedback but using it to write the book you want to write? Can you tell us anything about that process? When did she come in? How did she sort of tell you one thing and you're like, yes, I see what you're saying, but I'm going to do this with it because this is my spin on the book?
Yeah, I guess Bella, she loved the first draft, and she said she had to go and have a lie down after she'd read it, because she was just so kind of emotionally exhausted at the end of it. I thought, well, that's an interesting response. And then she was just working with me to say, well, the first draft had Imogen's tale in and as well, didn't it? Had her voice, and she said, well, do we need Imogen? And that was I was quite sad to see Imogen go, as her voice go as a character, because I really did enjoy writing her, but maybe I'll put her in another book sometime. But I think it was right to make it just Joe, and that just took me a bit of time to sit with that and think about it. And because I've got the moving back and forth through time, I think that helps to compensate for losing the other voice. But what I think with Bella, she just kind of hints to me about, could you have a think about this? And she's certainly never puts down, it should be like this, and you must do this, and this is where this must happen. It's not that sort of thing at all. She just waits really for me to say, I need to do this, don't I? And then she goes, oh, wonderful, yes, do. And so she lets me come to it in my kind of own way. So there's never a battle over anything really. It's I love the way she edits, and she's very astute and sympathetic and empathetic. So yeah, I think that's how it came about really. A series of suggestions, and then me admitting what I knew all along. You know what I mean?
Oh, I do. That sounds like so much like me. And at the moment, I'm editing with my agent. We're going out soon. It's exactly that. Your editor, your agent, whoever it is working with you, is there to help you make the book the best book, but it's your book rather than them just telling you what to do.
Completely.
So,
sometimes you'd love someone to tell you what to do, though, wouldn't you? You just, please, you just do it. You do it. And then it would be so much easier. But no, it's got to be your book.
No, unfortunately, at the end of the day, it's sitting down and getting the writing done, getting the editing done.
Yeah.
Just to end off this segment, I wanted to sort of go in depth about one thing. So one of the things that I love in poetry that I think is really good poetry, and that your work is full of, and is one of my favorite things in your work, among many, many things that I love, is I think that a lot of the impact of poetry comes from that emotional misstep where you think the poem is going one way, it's chugging along, you think it's a poem about this, and then all of a sudden it changes and you realize it's about something else, or at least about something more. And I think the poems that do that best, they surprise you not by changing up entirely what the poet is doing, but just cutting right to the heart of something and going, this is the deeper truth, and you haven't even realized it yet. And then you sit there going, yes, that's really the thing. That's the core of the thing. It peels back all the layers beyond the ones that I saw, and that's what's. How do you do that? How is that instinct? Do you craft that?
I think it's instinct really, and again, it's knowing what's at the heart of this, what you're trying to say. Perhaps one of the poems that I can think of where that maybe happens is when Joe and Imogen, they're planning their kind of first sexual experience together, and it's all kind of, oh, come round, my mum's going to be out, and but Joe's had bad news, and then there's this kind of, we think that they're the perfect couple, and that it's all romance and flowers, but actually by the end maybe we see a huge distance and a disconnect. And it's about knowing your characters, and also about thinking, well, I want to be truthful here in terms of actually what it's like being a teenager in love, and you believe that this is everything and it's wonderful and it's perfect, but actually how can you expect another 15-16-year-old to get your emotional truth, or what you're going through when they're going through so much? You haven't had those experiences really together that can truly connect you, and that can leave you feeling maybe lonely or sad or misunderstood, and a kind of breakdown in communication from that point onwards. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. I think that really is it. It's you always step beyond what's the image I'm creating and what's the emotion, and that comes out of the characters being so well drawn. And I guess that's one of the things that would surprise people about a verse novel, that they work just like any other novel. There are detailed three-dimensional characters, and there's a narrative arc just like in any other book.
Yeah, definitely. And you've got to boil all of that stuff down into its bare bones, and hopefully that's why it has the emotional impact that it does, because you just get right to it.
Well, I think it's wonderful. And 3rd of September 2020, everyone, we're going to drop some links in the description to go and buy the book. So go and either pre-order or buy, depending on when you're watching this. Thank you so much.